Hey guys, welcome back. I meant to come out with this video a lot sooner, but I was a little under the weather and had a dog sit for my mom. But now I'm back with a vengeance because I've been playing the shit out of Secret of Mana, the remake that was recently released for PS4 and Vita and other stuff. And it's awesome. It's every bit the game I remember it being. It is. I love it. It's awesome. But, if you go online, all you will find is everyone's calling it a bad remake. Everyone's shitting all over it. And I gotta tell you, I've never seen... Oh, I have, but I've never seen so many fucking crybabies just shit all over something that's not even a bad thing. It's amazing. So this video is going to focus mainly on all the reasons why they're crybabies and why Secret of Mana, the remake, is great. But I'm also going to talk about cheap remakes and why they're actually a good thing, because this is sort of relevant for those of you who started watching my channel because of the Resident Evil 2 remake stuff. I mean, we all care, we all want remakes, we want our favorite games to come back and a glorious, rebirth, but this is sort of relevant because, what if we get a game that is a lot like the game we remember it being, and does it have to be new every time? Do we have to get completely reimagined, Final Fantasy VII, the way Square Enix is working on right now? Or would it have been just fine, to make it the game it was, but with better graphics? And because this is what the new Secret of Mana is. It's basically, it is like 99% the original game that it was, with extra bells and whistles, including voice acting, and I think it's fucking great. But again, the whiners, the criers, they're gonna be the loudest because they're gonna make the most noise. So this video is mainly to counter just all the fucking bitching, because God, it's overwhelming. And the whining's not even coming from, I mean, it is, but I'm not just talking about whiners on forums and things like that. I'm talking about actual supposed gaming journalists on supposedly reputable websites, just bitching and moaning and crying their fucking eyes out over just the stupidest shit. My God. Okay, you remember the Cuphead incident where dude was playing Cuphead and just sucking and couldn't even get past the tutorial stage, and then everyone began to question, maybe gaming journalists should actually be good at games? Yeah, I agree. Gaming journalists actually used to be really badass back in the old days of GamePro and Nintendo Power. In that heyday, those dudes used to be badasses. Okay, they used to play Nintendo games and beat the entire game before writing up a review. Okay, and that sounds like not much today by today's standards, but there's a reason the phrase Nintendo hard is a thing. Those games were fucking hard. Okay, it used to be a big deal when you could beat a game back in the day. Being at a party and you're talking to friends, like you mentioned, I beat Ninja Gaiden, and they're like, "What? You beat it? No way! Well, who was the final boss? What was it?" It was a big deal back in the day because those games were fucking hard. And still to this day, I maintain if you show me somebody who says they beat Battletoads as a kid, and I will show you a fucking liar. That's how hard that game was. But I digress. Point is, gaming journalists used to play the whole game, give their review, and we could trust them because they played the whole fucking game. And nowadays, these fucking chodes are just like, they'll play the game for a few hours and then they'll give their opinion, and that is so much more clear to me these days, especially with their coverage of Secret of Mana, because you can tell they didn't spend much time with it. They were just so fucking triggered by a few examples. You know, like I read one that was like, oh, I want to play a Secret of Mana that looks like the box art from the Super Nintendo cartridge. Really? That's why you're giving this game a bad review, because it doesn't look like the box art? Seriously? What the fuck? I mean, God, a number of things. You know, a lot. You know, they'll bitch about it, like, well, they should have used hand-drawn 2D sprites and that look really beautiful, and instead of these ugly 3D polygons, and it just looks like a mobile game. Ugh. There's a few things here that they clearly didn't research, but you know, a few years ago, Square Enix released Adventures of Mana. For those of you that don't know this, and I'd wager it's actually a lot of you, even you diehard Secret of Mana fans out there, Secret of Mana is actually part of a like an original trilogy, and Secret of Mana itself is actually the second game in that trilogy. Now, that being said, we in the West did get the first game in that series, and it was known to us as Final Fantasy Adventure. It was on the Game Boy. It was basically, it was actually sort of an answer to like Nintendo's Legend of Zelda. They wanted to make an action RPG like that game. And in Japan, the series is known as Seiken Densetsu. It means like sacred sword, sort of whatever in Japanese, and that was the first game in that series. Well, a few years back, well, and before then, they actually remade the first one in Japan for mobile. You know, I've said in the past, mobile gaming in Japan is really fucking huge for some reason, and they retitled it Adventures of Mana, and it was on mobile, and it could have stayed there, but the main Mana producer right now, Masaru Oyamada, wanted, you know, Western fans to be able to play it, so they ported it over to the PS Vita. And as soon as I heard about it, I fucking downloaded the shit out of it. This was a few years back, so I played it back then and loved it, and immediately wanted Secret of Mana. So in a way, one of the reasons I'm not as fucking butthurt, although I still wouldn't be, because, you know, I'm a grown man, is because I kind of already knew what to expect, and this remake is basically kind of what I was expecting, because I played Adventures of Mana. If you haven't played Adventures of Mana, I highly recommend you get it if you have a PS Vita. It is awesome. It's a great recreation, and one of the journalist's articles even mentions Adventures of Mana and thinks that game kicked ass, but turns his nose up to this game, and it's frustrating that there are certain quality of life things that they didn't add to this game that they could have, and it would have made it better, sure, but it's not really a big fucking deal. I mean, for you younger gamers out there, I mean, how many times have you had like older guys telling you, you know, back in my day we played fucking games with continues and credits, and then if you fucking lost all your lives, you know, you had to start the game over from the very beginning. There were no fucking memory cards or anything like that. Password systems didn't come till later. You know, you ever feel like you kind of missed out on the old days? You kind of, games were more challenging, and you kind of wish you'd been around back then when games were stupid hard. Well, right now you have the opportunity to play Secret of Mana basically the way it was. Like I said, it is like 99% the same fucking game as it was on Super Nintendo. Okay, and that's another thing. This is a remake of a Super Nintendo game. Okay, so before, you know, any of you, you know, want to come back at me with the Shadow of Colossus remake, that was a PS2 game, an epic looking PS2 game. So yeah, a remake of that game needs to be absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous, and it is. So before you tell me, well, that's how you do a remake, it's like, okay, but it's still the same fucking game as it was on PS2. It just has modern graphics and therefore looks incredible. Secret of Mana was a Super Nintendo game. If you change too much of it, it changes the game, and you don't want that. This is a series that has been dormant for such a long time that to do anything other than release it almost exactly the way it was would be doing it a disservice to fans who could get into it for the first time by playing it as it was. I mean, I've seen some articles that were like, yeah, you're better off getting the Super NES Classic and playing it on there. Oh, okay, yeah, let me do that. Oh wait, Nintendo didn't make enough units. So I guess that's out of the fucking question. Plus, I've already played Secret of Mana, the Super Nintendo version. I want to try it in a new way. It's just, oh my god. Fucking crybabies. Okay, so, you know, there was the guy that was like, oh, box art, we should look like that. Oh, okay. And gave it a bad review for that reason. Yes, it's great. But that's not all, you know, so the 2D sprite thing, you know, because if you've ever played Legend of Mana on PS1, sure, that game looked amazing, awesome. But back to what I was saying about Masaru Oyamada wanting, you know, Western fans to be able to play, you know, Adventures of Mana, and basically his goal was to make every entry in the Mana series to be playable on modern consoles. So bless him for that. That is fucking awesome. So his whole thing, and he even defended the use of, you know, 3D polygons as opposed to 2D sprites by making it this way, because remember, Adventures of Mana came out on mobile first. By making it, you know, 3D polygons, you know, he was able to build a foundation with which to make future sequels or remakes for the sequels. He even said that was mentioned. His idea is to churn these things out as fast as possible, which is nice, and this is me adding this, so that we're not fucking waiting like 80 years for every remake we want to see, okay? It's bad enough that we're waiting for Resident Evil 2 to fucking come out God knows when, but Final Fantasy VII, like, when are we going to get that game? It occurred to me recently how many sequels and remakes I'm fucking waiting for. So yeah, I'm happy that Secret of Mana is out already, and I can play the shit out of it, and it's the same game it was. If anything, it's a little harder, because you now have like full 360-degree control with your character, instead of the 8-way control, and so you have to be kind of precise with the analog stick when you're, you know, changing direction and attacking enemies. It's sort of like Hotline Miami in that way. Furthermore, this is Square Enix we're talking about. They have a lot of remakes, okay? The first Final Fantasy can be obtained multiple ways, okay? You've got the Virtual Console on the Wii, if you want to play the old Nintendo version, which I do not recommend. My god, fuck that game. You've got the Final Fantasy Origins through the PlayStation Network that comes with Final Fantasy 1 and 2. If you've got a PSP, you can play the 20th anniversary of Final Fantasy 1 or 2. They're separate games. Or you can play those exact same versions made for mobile on your mobile. You've got options. Square Enix always makes lots of remakes of their classic beloved games, but let me point out to you, Square Enix today, as it's known today, the Japanese company, is known for one series, and that's Final Fantasy. Okay, yeah, they're the publisher of Tomb Raider, they're the publisher of Deus Ex, of Just Cause, but their flagship is Final Fantasy, and we rarely see any love given to their other beloved, but, you know, smaller games, which are like Secret of Mana and Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. The Chrono series and the Mana series have been ignored for far too long. Finally, we're getting some semblance of a resurgence, and these fucking douche nozzles are just shitting all over it and giving it negative press and influencing those of you who the Rotten Tomato types who just have to check Rotten Tomatoes first to find out if they should go spend their money on a movie, and then you do that with the fucking reviewers online. Don't trust them. Do not fucking trust them. They can be counted on for the hard news to find out what happened with this development of this game and why Destiny's story was fucking lackluster and what happened with all the drama and Mass Effect Andromeda. But when it comes to reviews, they don't know how to be objective. they're emotional. They're like children. They will shit on a game, and it will influence those people who don't want to think for themselves, I guess. I don't fucking know. I love Secret of Mana. Okay, so before anyone tells me, he was like, well, you're not a true fan if you like this remake. It dishonors the original. No! I love Secret of Mana so much, I'll buy this one, and then if they make the remake that you wanted, with beautiful hand-drawn 2D sprites, I'll buy that one too. I love Secret of Mana. Newsflash, I love Secret of Mana. I will buy it in any form it comes. Really, I will. But if you ever want to see Seiken Densetsu 3, otherwise known to us in the West as the unreleased Secret of Mana 2, it would help if you actually showed Square the money, okay? This is the company about 4 years ago. The vice president, Shinji Hashimoto, was asked about, you know, if we were ever going to get a sequel to Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross. And he was like, if they want to see a sequel to the Chrono series, they should buy more. I mean, he was literally that blunt. He was like, I don't see that there's any money in that series because the sales aren't that great. So, yeah, it was a little harsh. I mean, it was, but at the same time, that's ultimately how it works. If you're gonna shit all over this because, you know, it wasn't the remake that you wanted, you need to know that you're having a very negative effect on its sales, and you don't seem to be aware that there are other people, fans of the original, that do like this remake. And again, you know, we never got Secret of Mana 2, and from what I understand, it's one of the greatest fucking Super Nintendo games of all time, but we never got it in the West for a main reason being it was too hard to port over. It was a massive game. It pushed the limits of a Super Nintendo cartridge, and there were bugs when they tried to localize it. I mean, I'd heard rumors it was also because Square Enix, known as Squaresoft back then, wasn't really on great terms with Nintendo of America at the time. But I can't really prove that. I haven't really found any real proof of that. But I do believe the thing about the bugs, it was a massive fucking game. It's been attempted. They tried to port it a few times, and recently they released on the Switch the Seiken Densetsu trilogy, you know. And well, that's neat. That's great. Japanese fans get to have their series, but we've never gotten Seiken Densetsu 3, and I want that fucking game. And these fucking chodes out there are shitting all over my chances of ever getting to play that game. Would I prefer to play the original with the, because that game also looked amazing. If you see screenshots of Secret of Mana 2 on, you know, on Super Nintendo, it looked amazing. It looked like a fucking PlayStation 1 game. And I'd love to play that version, but I'll take it in this version too. I don't care. I just want to fucking play it. And you chodes are ruining that. And chances are, we probably will see Seiken Densetsu 3 in this form, because Oyamada-san basically said as much. I mean, he was like, you know, the problems of trying to localize the original would be a lot easier to deal with if we did start from scratch. I.e. using this as a foundation, this engine, and you know, why does everybody think that Japanese companies are the same as like EA? They're not. Number one, EA can literally afford to not listen to a word you say because they can count on reliable sales from their yearly sports titles. Okay, they can literally hear your complaints about microtransactions, which are valid. I don't disagree with those. I'm not saying that you guys that have a problem with microtransactions are whining. No, I fucking hate those. I agree with you there. But EA only understands money. They don't begin to change until they see sales continuously drop. But it has to be a large loss of sales, because like I said, their yearly sports titles will make them that money, and they don't nearly, so only a few guys not buying their game because of microtransactions, it's not going to work. Japanese companies are a different story. if they don't see that money coming in, those series will die, or they will go dormant, possibly forever. Okay, we saw it with fighting games. You know, Capcom put out their Capcom Fighting Jam back in the late '90s, late 2000s. And the game bombed, and we didn't see really another major Capcom fighting game until Street Fighter 4. I mean, it was almost a decade. The fighting game scene just died incredibly because they thought there wasn't a market for it anymore, and they took a risk putting out Street Fighter 4, but it really paid off because it brought back fighting games. And what's another series that Capcom's been sitting on that we're finally getting another one of? Mega Man. I mean, they recently saw that there was a market for 2D platformers, so we're getting it. But look how long it's taken. Look how long we've waited. Look how many old IPs we haven't heard from in a while. It is risky for Japanese companies to come out with new IPs, so they continuously just try to cash in on their popular ones, like Resident Evil, like Mega Man, like Street Fighter. Konami, they're fucking evil. The heads of the company are. But what they are doing makes more business sense if they want to survive. There are better ways to do it. They should follow Square Enix and Capcom's example. But they've given up all hope basically on the Western audience. They really, I think they only put out Metal Gear Survive because they thought it actually would get them some money from Westerners. But anything else, they just, Japanese companies aren't like EA. If you stop supporting your beloved series, they will stop making games in your beloved series. It is literally as simple as that. Japanese companies are having a hard time staying alive anyway, because like I said, console gaming in Japan is down. It's not as big as mobile gaming. And that's another thing too. Square Enix could have released this Secret of Mana remake as a mobile only game. Okay? Like I said, most of the old Final Fantasy games, if you want to go back and play them, you can play them all pretty much on mobile. Like that's it. But producer Masaru Oyamada had the heart to want to release this on home consoles, and he should be credited for that. And instead, his game is getting shit on by fucking jackasses, crybabies. We didn't used to listen to crybabies, first of all. Why do we listen to crybabies now? When did that start? I don't. We used to ignore them. We used to shun them, and rightfully so. We used to ignore them, and then they would either go away, or they would stop crying and man up. Okay? And we need to do that again. I don't know why we started listening to crybabies, but I don't fucking get it. I mean... So another article I was reading, was also saying, like, there's a full, English dub, all the lines are spoken now, and there are cutscenes, but none of the characters' lips move, which is unsettling. Yeah, or maybe you're just kind of a bitch. Maybe that's it. You want to talk about unsettling? Why don't you go fucking Google Faces of Death and then get back to me about unsettling, okay? My God. You know what other game didn't have, characters' lips move? Bloodborne. And yet that game was critically acclaimed. Oh yeah, there were the cutscenes in Bloodborne where characters' lips would move, but those were in the cutscenes. They did not feature your designed, customized main character. And there weren't a lot of cutscenes because that game has virtually no fucking story. Okay, and I love Bloodborne. Okay, I actually do love Bloodborne, but it's amazing to me the fucking double standard. And they're also not considering, another thing. Yeah, their lips don't move. To me, that's not a big deal. I remember playing Tomb Raider 1 and 2 on PlayStation 1, and Lara would bob her head, and that's how you knew she was talking, basically. Her lips did not move. There were a few games on PlayStation 1 where characters' lips would actually move. So I actually remember those days. Not a big deal. Would it be nice if the characters' lips did move in this game? Sure. I'm not saying they shouldn't. Yeah, I'd take it. It's fine. But I'm not gonna fucking like wet myself because they're not. Okay? You know, and another reason their lips probably don't move is because the script is pretty much basically the same. And anyone who knows anything about, you know, like Japanese anime, you know, an English dub of Japanese anime knows that they have to sort of sometimes change the dialogue a little bit so that the Japanese speaker and the English speaker both stop speaking at the same time because the characters are only moving one way. So they'll find a way to fix it in English to where it's basically the same basic gist of what they were saying, what the script says, but find a way to make it more condensed or longer if they have to. You know, in the old days, that's another. I'm going to bring this up again later. But in the old days, we had Speed Racer, which was, you know, Japanese anime, and if you remember how the acting worked back then, it was like, haha, I'm going to beat you in this race, Speed, haha. The haha was added because the characters' lips were still moving, and so they didn't know how to get around that back then. So they did that. So that's, I think, one major reason why the characters' lips don't move in the cutscenes is because that would take more time. They could go back in, sure, and then do the Final Fantasy 15 thing and actually add the lip sync, but you know, this is a cheap remake. It's a budget game, and that's all that this one needs to be, because it's one step closer to Seiken Densetsu 3, which you fucking losers are gonna just shit all over my chances of playing. Okay. The other thing is everybody keeps saying like, oh, the voice acting is terrible. Oh my god, you're better off putting it on Japanese and just, you know, reading English subtitles. First of all, get over yourself. Get your head out of your ass, okay? The people that say that you should just listen to it in Japanese and read it in English subtitles are the same kind of people that the same anime aficionado snobs that only watch, you know, anime in Japanese. And it's amazing to me because it's like, we've come a long way. English dub has come a long way. We actually have very talented actors and actresses, you know, putting their heart and soul into these characters, and everybody's always like, oh, it's overacted, it's terrible. I got news for you. It's overacted in Japanese too. Okay? It is. It just is. You just think it's worse because you understand English. But you're so fucking pretentious that you assume it's better in Japanese. Okay? That makes you no different than the person who goes into a tattoo parlor and says, I want the symbol, the Japanese kanji symbol for love or hope. I want that on my arm right there. Without even knowing that that's actually the kanji symbol for love or hope. And then they tell the tattoo artist to put it, the tattoo artist puts it there, and then years later, somebody who actually can read Japanese kanji is like, why do you have glory hole on your arm there? That's weird. You know, here's another little anecdote too. Okay, Resident Evil 1 in 1996. For the longest time, we all thought that game was only, well, those of us that knew, we all thought that game was only in English. Like literally, even in Japan, it was only in English with Japanese subtitles. Back then, we all thought it was because, you know, Shinji Mikami wanted a more westernized feel. He wanted to give it sort of a Western B-movie cheese tone to it. But it came out years later that the reason that game was only in English was because the Japanese voice acting was worse than the English voice acting. Can you fucking imagine? Okay, and this is the game that is notorious for some of the worst voice acting ever. The Japanese voice cast was worse. Okay? And let me add that the English voice cast literally consisted of people in Okinawa, where their studio was, that could speak English. Okay? That Just sit on that. But I'll bet you these fucking chodes that are like, oh, you're better off listening to it in Japanese. I bet you these chodes would think that the Japanese voice cast from Resident Evil 1996 was better than the English voice cast. Okay, that's stupid. If you can handle anime in English, you can handle the voice acting to the Secret of Mana remake. Okay, it's fine. And I got news for you too. One of the things they always say is, well, they overact. But that's sort of how voice acting is. That's why certain when they get like big name actors, like movie or TV show actors, to do voice casts, some of their performances can come off a little flat sometimes. Sometimes they do a really good job, but usually it's the ones that do a really good job are the ones with very like recognizable voices. But the ones that you don't really recognize just their voice, they are always accused of being really flat, and that's because they're used to acting with their entire body. When you're a stage actor or a film actor, you create your character using body language, how the character stands, how he moves, how he walks, and then when you talk, you don't have to add much. You're just that character. Voice acting is different. You bring a character to life using everything. Using just your voice, but you present everything with just your voice. So sometimes you have to create, so it's sort of an exaggeration. And that's not just anime or video game characters. That's cartoons. That's classic Bugs Bunny and fucking Mickey Mouse. I mean, that's how being a voice actor works. And this game is fine. I love the English voice acting. Also, I don't know, call me crazy, I like it when people get jobs. I like it when voice actors get work. I know it's weird. It's weird. I know. I don't know why I've always been that way, but I am. But yeah, whatever. Let's just shit all over it. Let's just fucking. Oh my god. Plus, I mean, I don't know about you, but back in the day, in the Super Nintendo days, a lot of us did play Secret of Mana with a friend. I actually played it with an older stepbrother, and he did most of the reading. But usually when I would play with my brother, any game that required reading, I would do all the reading. I always did that for my brother. I was the older one. It made sense. Plus, I liked reading it, and I liked giving voice to the different characters. It's just always something I've had fun doing. So Resident Evil, when we'd read the files and shit, I would read them, and when we played Final Fantasy VII, we were a little bit older, but I was still reading them. And nowadays, you don't have. I feel like nobody does that a lot, and so it helps to be able to play a game from the Super Nintendo era that just reads it to you. It makes it better when you're playing with another person. It makes you guys feel more engaged. Whereas, before, if you're not going to read to your friend, you're going to, just tell me when you're done reading that and I'll hit X and we'll get the next message. I mean, is that what you're going to do? I mean, it helps. Playing a 2-player, 3-player game, because it's technically 3-player, is better when, the voice acting, when there's voice acting, because it keeps you both engaged. It puts you in the same situation. It's just better. I think so anyway. I mean, but if you need proof that that even the Japanese overact, I mean, let's take an example. Let's use everybody's favorite game director, Hideo Kojima. Okay, when he's giving an interview or accepting an award, he's kind of just like "Domo arigato gozaimasu," normal Japanese speaking, but a Japanese voice actor would sound more like "Domo arigato gozaimasu," and I'm right. I'm right. That is how a Japanese voice actor would say it. Welcome to voice acting, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone overacts, okay? Now, I mean, if you're one of those people that prefers the original language because you want to maintain the integrity of the script, then okay, I get it. I actually do. I prefer Ong Bak and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in their original languages because they were the languages I first originally saw them in, and I liked the script the way it was the first time. And when I actually heard them in an English dub, Kung Fu movie English dub still sucks. It's not nearly as good as anime. But you know, the word choices, what they chose to say in English, I didn't quite like as much. I actually liked the writing better, you know, with the English subtitles when it was in their original languages. And I've even seen an anime that I actually do prefer in Japanese, Macross Plus, a few years back, several years back actually. I actually saw it in Japanese first with English subtitles. I really liked it, and then I gave it a shot in English, and I actually preferred it in Japanese. And that's mainly because I liked the dialogue, and the dialogue was better written. It was better written. It wasn't because of the performances at all. It was more over the writing. And so I get when you prefer, you know, the Japanese and English subtitles better, but for every one of you guys out there that like it for that reason, there's like 50 people that just assume that it's better in Japanese. And then sometimes, you know, they localize, they westernize the characters for our sake. I have a friend who was watching another friend of hers play Final Fantasy 15, and her friend is one of those snobs that just has to play it in Japanese. And both of them were familiar with anime in Japanese, so much so that they know what certain words mean when they hear it in Japanese. And when Noctis and the guys were talking to Cindy, and you know, she was saying y'all and stuff, you know, my friend came at me and was like, why, you know, they had her, she wasn't saying that in Japanese. Like, why did the subtitles say that? And I was like, well, because Cindy was made that way. She was westernized. She was meant to be a country girl, so she's going to say y'all and things like that. And there are other characters that were very westernized in Final Fantasy 15. And if you automatically, for snobbish reasons, put it on Japanese just because you insist that it's better, you're going to miss out on things like that. And Cindy wasn't the only one. Remember Dino? Dino was supposed to be like a fucking wise guy, you know, from Jersey or New York. I mean, he just was, and you know, you don't get that in Japanese. So usually I will prefer English, just because I understand it. I don't want to have to read subtitles, even though I don't have a problem with it. In fact, I play a lot of my games with subtitles, despite them being in English, just because I want to make sure I heard everything that was said. But if I'm even moving you to try this game out, like, don't be one of those people, okay? Give it a shot. Plus, you know, a lot of these article reviewers that are saying that, I can tell, haven't gotten to the end, to a major part toward the end. You know, when Randy, that's his actual canonical official name, the main character of Secret of Mana, finds out, you know, the truth about his parents. That's a very, very powerful scene, and I watched it in English, of course, and it's still very, very good. And I found myself very glad that it was English, that it was voice acted out, because it makes it more powerful. And I went through that scene as a kid. Okay, a lot of people are just remembering their fond memories of this game on Super Nintendo, and because this game doesn't quite capture that feel they had, they're shitting on it, and they don't realize it. And I hope a lot of you out there that listen to me and get this game, who did play the original one, I hope it doesn't affect you too. You should almost try to pretend you've never played it, because I mean, I've seen it. I've seen that nostalgia hurt too many people's opinion of this game. Because another thing about it, and I'll actually see this one sort of, the music. If you've never played Secret of Mana, and you're playing this game for the first time, this version, I actually do highly recommend you set the original soundtrack to the original and not the remake. That's the other thing too. They'll shit on the music, but the option to listen to the original soundtrack is there, so that sort of invalidates that argument. And my own personal opinion is some of the new tracks are better, some of them are not. And it's as simple as that. I'm willing to listen to the new arranged soundtrack because I've played the original. But if you've never played the original, I actually really highly do recommend you set it to the original soundtrack, because it is one of the best, and it still holds up to this day. I even tested it out. The music still sounds fucking great. But yeah, I mean, so try not to have your rose-colored glasses on. I know this was a very beloved game, and it's still awesome. And you just kind of have to see past your own bias. And I'm really only telling you guys who are susceptible to things like that, because I feel like most of you out there who have played the original are probably going to feel the same way I do. It's not a... You're going to like it just fine. It's fine. I think a lot of you too understand that Square Enix churns out multiple remakes for multiple games, and sometimes we all need reminding that a Japanese company needs to see a market. They need to see money, the possibility of making money in order for a series to continue. That's why so many series, and look at how many Japanese companies have merged. Okay, I mean, Square Enix is one of them. It used to be Squaresoft, and then there used to be Enix. Okay, Bandai Namco, you know, two different companies. Again, Koei Tecmo, two different Japanese companies that are now one. Also, I mean, there have been so many, so I don't know what I need to do to convince some of you guys out there that Japanese companies are in trouble, but if any of them are making your favorite series, you need to show that series support. You really do. And Square Enix isn't perfect, obviously. I heard that they recently ported the mobile version of Chrono Trigger over to PC or Steam, and I heard it's total shite, basically. And from what I understand, it sounds lazy. It sounds really lazy. I heard that it's such a lazy port that they even have like the little menu button at the top, like if it were a mobile game, which is terrible. Yeah, we should criticize them for that. But if it's a game if it's a product that's perfectly fine, it's just maybe you don't have a preference. Then the best thing to do is to show your support and then let them know what you didn't like. I mean, that's what I did with my Resident Evil 7 video a few videos back. I actually talked about liking that game, but I focused more on the things I didn't like, and it was, you know, constructive criticism at its best. The video I wanted to make before I decided to make this one first was about Dissidia, the new Dissidia, Final Fantasy NT. And I love it, it's great, but it's not as great as the PSP games. And yet I still bought that game, I still support that game because I want more Dissidia. It is literally as simple as that. Unless they really shit on a series like Konami has, you know, I'm going to continue to show support because I want these games to come back. I mean, Mana and Chrono are two series that deserve to come back, and Mana, we're finally seeing things happen, and yet these fucking like diehard fanboys are going to ruin it for everybody, and I don't want to see that happen. It's fucking wrong. It's just wrong. Especially when you consider that one of the reasons this game, Secret of Mana, the remake, is a cheap remake, is because it was probably risky to make it a bigger production, to spend more money on it. I mean, that's why it is a cheap remake. Cheap remakes are a good thing, especially for Japanese companies, where spending so much money on a full-fledged remake is questionable. Are they going to make money on it? Obviously, Square Enix knows they're going to cash in on Final Fantasy VII, so they can afford to take some risks. But Secret of Mana, a series that's been dormant for so long, this is kind of expected if you understand economics. I mean, if there's too big of a risk that a series won't do well because it just hasn't been heard of in forever, then why make it, you know, a major production? It may not make back that money. I mean, and Square Enix too, they have something that I hope Capcom actually emulates, which is the Square Enix Collective. Basically, after they acquired, you know, Eidos and Crystal Dynamics and all those other companies, they basically bought the licenses for a lot of their back catalog. You know, so Tomb Raider still makes money, Just Cause makes money, Deus Ex, But you know, they also have games like you know, Soul Reaver, the Legacy of Kain series. That's also under their umbrella. But most recently was Fear Effect, and Fear Effect actually. So the collective is basically a way for indie developers to pitch Square Enix an idea for a new game in that series, and if they like the idea, they'll give them the license to make an actual game. And a small company called Sushi, you know, sushi but with two E's instead of an I. They pitched Square Enix a new game in the Fear Effect series called Fear Effect Sedna, and Square liked it. They gave them the go ahead. They gave them the license to make the game. They put out a trailer, and the game doesn't look. It's out already, by the way. It doesn't look like an old Fear Effect game. Fear Effect actually was one of those games I mentioned in my last video. It was one of those games like it's kind of like Resident Evil, but with like anime and cel shaded. And Fear Effect actually was like one of the first games to ever use cel shading, and it was awesome. And it was fixed camera angles and, you know, tank controls and the whole 9 yards. And it was awesome. It was highly stylized. So this new Fear Effect Sedna, when they put out a trailer, you know, it's like, well, what the fuck is this? An isometric top-down view? That's weird. That's not like... It still looked cool, and again, like, I was fully willing to support that game because it was Fear Effect, and it's coming back, and that had me fucking excited. But because of fan demand, Sushi is willing to, and Square Enix gave them the go-ahead to actually make a full-fledged remake of the first game, and they intend to retain the tank controls, the fixed camera angles, the whole 9 yards. So there's hope. Square Enix is hope. I mean, just because we got a Secret of Mana remake that some of you out there don't like, doesn't mean you'll never get the one you want. I mean, come on. Like I said, there's like 3 different versions of Final Fantasy 1 out there you can get. I mean, this is Square Enix. They're not that stingy. Why do you and then Capcom, you know, that they keep re-releasing Resident Evils and porting them over to new systems because it's easy money. It's a good way to get revenue. I mean, what else do you expect them to do? I mean, in Monster Hunter, they took a big risk with Monster Hunter World because it was mainly popular only in Japan, and then in the West it saw some popularity on, you know, handheld consoles, but they took a big risk, and they wowed everyone with the trailer, and now Monster Hunter World is... Now it's popular in the West because Monster Hunter World's a shit. I was playing it myself. And, you know, so now they have 3 major series that they can expect to make money on, and that's Resident Evil, Monster Hunter, and Street Fighter. And I intend to buy the shit out of Mega Man 11 when it comes out, and I hope most of you out there too, so that they'll see money in Mega Man. But it really is, you know, as simple as that, and I hope I can convince some of you to check out the Secret of Mana remake, because it is awesome. If you've never played it, you're in for a treat. It is pretty old school though, so the combat is not as good. I mean, but if you can handle Dark Souls and Bloodborne, you can handle this. It's very outdated, I will admit. It's very much the Super Nintendo game it was, but, you know, I was around at the beginning of video games, more or less. You know, I was around with the Atari and the Nintendo. And so I've played most of the classic games. And I realize that for some of you young guys, trying to play an old game is like trying to watch an old movie, and that I can relate to. But, you know, when I actually sat down and watched, you know, Casablanca or Citizen Kane or The Godfather, and I fucking love those movies. They were fucking great. So if you give an old game with old mechanics a chance, I think you'll really find something to like. Because some of you out there, you know, you have an old soul. I think if you sit down and play a game that brought joy to so many of us out there, you'll understand what it's all about. And that's the least I can do, is to convince you to treat yourself like that. So, yeah, my next video is going to be about Dissidia. I'm totally going to make that video next. But what do you guys think? I mean, am I wrong? Did you absolutely hate the Secret of Mana remake? Did you actually play through it and then just decided that it's still the worst shit ever? If so, let me know why. I don't mind. Even though I was pretty rough on the critics, I actually am willing to have a civilized debate. I love that shit. Okay, I love shooting the shit with people that I agree with and don't agree with. It's fine. But yeah, do some of you out there agree? Do you think people are just overblowing it, kind of crying too much? Need to dry their tears a bit? Yeah. Let me know. Let me know down in the comments. And if you like the video, consider giving it a like, consider subscribing, and make sure you're still subscribed. My subscriber count has been fluctuating. I understand YouTube's fucking around with shit, and so make sure you're still subscribed. But in the meantime, I'll see you guys next time.